Okay, now that we've been through most of the theoretical material for this hybrid course, we want to take a minute or a few minutes to talk about whistleblowing, which is essentially when you decide as an employee in a firm that you might want to go outside your chain of command even because something so bad is happening that you just can't stand by and not do something about it. That could have, a lot of implications for other people. It could be very serious harm. You might just not be willing to just swallow it and just stay in the company and watch this activity go on. So if you notice in the book, it talks about kind of the when and the how of whistleblowing. So we'll talk about both of those. The when, there's a nice little list in the book that you'll see on the slide that they call triggers. What are some triggers that would let you know when you might want to blow the whistle? And keep in mind, as they talk about it in the book, they're making a point that you might not always want to blow the whistle when you see something that's unethical going on. You need to pick your battles. You can't say, oh, I saw the guy in the next cubicle make 5 personal photocopies. Right? I'm going to go tell his boss that he did this. You might not want to be quite that picky, quite that particular about the things that you tell on in a business. So you might want to think hard about when you would actually go to the wall to clear your conscience, to make sure that you're not cooperating with something that you shouldn't be. So the triggers that the book talks about are truth. Truth is being violated. Somebody is lying. Something kind of fundamental is happening that is untrue. You feel the urge, the need to divulge that to someone. Whether employee or customer rights might be being violated. You see that you're selling a faulty product and passing it off as a good one, or employees are being defrauded in some way, that somehow the rights of those groups or other groups are being violated. That trust is being violated, that someone is getting something from someone because they trust them when actually they're violating that trust. Okay, that they're getting goods from someone that shouldn't be giving them goods. Harm, that there's actual maybe physical or psychological harm being done. An example would be if you see a product that's going to be on an airplane being, faulty, and you know that they're going to put it on the plane and it could cause damage, if not danger, to the people on that plane. It's actually a serious harm that you need to consider blowing the whistle on. Your reputation might be at stake. If something is going on in the firm that's actually going to cause you long-term damage in terms of your business reputation, it might be worth, pushing the issue a lot more than you would otherwise. Similarly, your organization's reputation. If you find out that your department is dumping toxic waste, no one else might know about it, that could hurt the whole firm's reputation, as opposed to just your department. So you need to really be careful about safeguarding the overall reputation of your company. And finally, if the law is being broken. There are a lot of things going on in there, as Mr. Eaton talked to you about earlier, that the law is an important component of whether or not you're doing ethical things. Not exactly the same, obviously, as doing ethical things, but it's important to consider the law and whether the law is being broken when you're deciding to blow the whistle. So as you go to the next section, as you go to the how of blowing the whistle, you'll notice there's a lovely little list of things in a paragraph, in a single paragraph under that heading, that are buzzed through really, really quickly. I want to take those out and spend a couple minutes looking at them so that you have a chance to think about what they're really implying you would do before you blow the whistle. So precursors to whistleblowing, before you even get down to those details that we'll be talking about in a minute. The first one is that they're saying, okay, now before you even go into the whistleblowing process, think about whether or not you're dealing with a serious issue. Is this an important issue for some reason? Does it have serious consequences? Are there serious issues like the trust and the truth that we talked about a minute ago really involved in this? It's a serious enough issue to take on. Second, that you've assembled the facts. It isn't that you just have one little memo that you found by accident that implies to you that something dirty is going on, but you've actually gotten together enough information that you can see the whole picture and recognize that there really is something wrong going on. Finally, you check those facts to be sure they're accurate. It's not just scuttlebutt. It's not just hearsay from someone, that someone in the next cubicle told you that somebody said this to somebody, and that must imply that you're dumping toxic waste. Okay, you need to actually get the facts, check the facts, verify the facts, a little bit like a journalist, to make sure that you have valid information. Maybe you've asked your peers for advice. Maybe you said, hey, have you noticed this? If you have somebody you trust, have you noticed this? And does this bother you? And what do you think we should do? And you've actually talked to people about it in a low-key manner before you start to escalate. And finally, if you see a law or policy about to be violated, and notice that includes policies, as Mr. Eaton talked about earlier in the course, that those policies are important too. If you see somebody violating a policy, there's a reason they exist, and in some cases it could be that shareholders or some other component of the firm is relying on those policies to be followed, and if they're not, it's very important that other people know. So again, that's just that little paragraph above the list of the how of whistleblowing. So now let's take a look at the slide that actually has the steps, the 7 steps. The first one, if you're going to blow the whistle, if you have found an issue that you feel strongly enough about to go through the process, step one, critical importance is to go to your boss, your immediate supervisor. Okay, there's a reason that systems are set up this way. There's a reason that companies are in organization charts that have boxes that are on top of one another. Okay, you have a responsibility to talk to your direct supervisor or direct manager first. Now, the book talks about how, of course, you might not get satisfaction in that initial meeting. So as you're talking to the manager and not getting anywhere, if you don't get anywhere, then you might want to think about approaching the manager again, and possibly this time with something in writing, a memo, perhaps. And you'll see a lot of I was just going to say CYA memos, and I'll let you figure out what those are. But that's one way that you can kind of keep track of information that you have relayed to your manager, so that down the road, and speaking of personal reputation, down the road it's clear that you tried to solve this problem and you tried to solve it early. Okay, so if, the other thing that's very important at this step, if you write the memo and you still don't get anywhere, your company probably has a policy or a procedure that you're supposed to follow if there are methods on paper or on your computer that show how the company wants you to go through certain steps in order to blow the whistle. Make sure you follow those steps to the letter, because down the road it could save your job if they find that you've actually talked to your boss, you've done the memo, you've talked to this person, you've talked to that person. So find out what those procedures are and try to really follow them. Generally, there are certain steps that you'll want to follow, which include the next one I found interesting that they've made explicit, which is go home and talk about this with your family. I've actually known a couple of very serious whistleblowers, people who have lost very important jobs after testifying before Congress about something that an agency did. It's very important that your family be on board, because it is possible, if you go all the way with a whistleblowing complaint, that you will lose your job. I mean, there are huge implications. They also mention in that little segment that you might want to start keeping a diary or keeping notes of the process that you're going through, so that as days go by or months go by, if you end up in court or you end up losing your job and want to file a lawsuit, that you have some record of exactly what you did when. Next, they're saying, okay, your boss is not giving you any satisfaction, you went to the trouble to formalize it in a memo, that you actually go to the next manager up. You go to your boss's boss. This is a huge step to take, and they make a very good recommendation here after watching how this plays out in my decade in corporate America. It's very, very important that you are delicate with your boss about going to the boss's boss. So they make a very good recommendation here, which is to talk to your own supervisor about how you feel so strongly about this issue that you feel like it's necessary to go to that person's boss, and how you'd really appreciate it if they would come with you. Okay, at that point, your boss may, absolutely turn you down, but at the same time, you're not blindsiding them. And one thing that you'll find as you enter corporate America is this chain of command thing has certainly not gone away. Most firms are not set up with the ethic of care. Okay, most firms are set up with a serious chain of command that has kind of military background, as you learn probably in your Management 350 class. The idea is that you never go around someone without notifying them. You do not blindside your boss. And this is something that's totally outside the whistleblowing procedure. This is just something that you as an employee will be looked down upon as a not very effective or not very in-the-know employee if you don't recognize that chain of command. So you offer to go with your manager. If your manager declines, of course, you would go on your own. The next step, if you don't get anywhere with your boss's boss, they suggest going to your company's ethics officer, which more and more companies are developing, and the position these days that they have an ethics officer on site, or an ombudsman, sometimes they're called, or an ombuds by people who don't like the man part. I've actually heard the word ombuds used. So usually what that might mean is there's a hotline, there's an anonymous call link that you can use. Be careful too, and when I was at my company, they started a program like that, and they had actually in the 1,000-person division, they had a guy that I knew quite well, and a lot of people knew quite well, who was the anonymous hotline answerer. And I knew that he would know 100 people easily by voice. You might want to keep in mind when you're making an anonymous call to one of those hotlines that you need to make sure that it's going somewhere that they actually don't know you. If that doesn't work, or if you think that that's not going quickly enough, or you think they're not taking you seriously through the ombudsman or ethics officer chain, then you just consider going outside your chain of command. And again, at this point, as they point out in the book, you are kind of taking a large risk. At this point, you might be thinking that you're not going to be working there anymore. But then it's also possible you wouldn't want to work there anymore if this kind of stuff was going on. So first, you might go to your HR department. You might go to your legal department. You might call auditors if it's financial fraud that you're concerned about. You would go outside your chain of command to other departments trying to find a way to get this problem solved. At that point, too, they also mention you might want to call your lawyer, because if and when you are fired over this event, or if you have to feel like you have to quit based on pressure from the company, you'll want to be prepared with an attorney. Finally, if all else fails, if you have done everything you can inside the firm, you've talked to the ethics officer, you've gone all the way to the top, you've gone to the CEO. Picture if you were the CEO of a 10,000 person company. Would you rather get a little bit wild-eyed telephone call from an employee, in Podunk, Indiana, a telephone call that says, I'm about to divulge that my division is dumping toxic waste to the press? Wouldn't that CEO rather hear that internally and solve that problem immediately than to have it go to the press? So even though you think, oh, well, I couldn't call the CEO, you should call the CEO before you go outside the firm. So if you need to, if you've done everything you can, you've called the CEO's office, you've left word that you're about to call the press, then yes, you would need to go to the regulators, go to the press if it's that important an issue. Then you should consider, if you haven't already been fired or haven't already quit the job that you were in when this whole thing started, maybe leaving the company. Because probably what you'll find is people who blow the whistle on a company and are inside the company, remaining inside the company, are not very favorably looked upon by their peers or their managers, especially after the managers see the person going outside the chain of command as they did. So in order to gain a level of respect back, it might require going to another firm and probably, hopefully, some firm that would actually be relishing your willingness to go to the wall over an ethical issue. So again, if you have been through this ethical decision-making training and you go to work and you find something that you really think shouldn't be countenanced, that you can't live with it as an employee, and you don't think that anyone else is going to do something about it, you think it's very important that you be the one and you go through these steps, you could be doing the firm, the society, the economy a very big favor by actually taking this all the way. Even at the risk to yourself, you'd be doing a favor for the system as a whole. So we'll be back. Thank you very much.